Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Anxiety Chats. Today we are joined by my friend Leila, a PPC manager and lover of travel who also struggles with anxiety. Is that how you describe yourself, Leila?
Yeah, that sounds like a good description.
I don't really know what a PPC manager is. It sounds like, I don't know, not what it is, eh?
Not really. It sounds like fancy, but it's not really. It's basically managing sort of pay-per-click ads on Google and social ads on Facebook. But yeah, I mean, I do like it. It's good. It's a good job.
And I didn't mention that you also have your own dog walking business. That's really cool.
That is cool. That is much more exciting. Yes, I do love that. That is my job that I love.
So cool. When you think of side hustles, you don't think of like, oh, I can actually just work with dogs and cats.
I know, it's literally the dream. Like, I'll never forget the moment of like, can you just do this as a job? And I was like, yeah, like, you know, it's so good. It's so rewarding. It's just, yeah, the best thing ever. If I could do it full time forever, I probably would.
Well,
easily.
Me and Leila both live in the same small town and it's just like covered in dogs.
So many dogs.
So it's a good place to have that business, I believe.
It definitely is, yeah. And it makes me want a dog as well, even though I know, because like you say, travel lover, it's not realistic having a dog, but
it's more tricky.
One so much.
You do have a gorgeous baby cat, Tony.
I do.
Shout out to Tony.
Shout out to Tony. Tony Stark.
Tony Stark. So my first question to you today was, how would you describe your anxiety? Obviously, we know each other well, me and Leila, and I would describe mine, agoraphobia and OCD. Is there a term that you would use to describe yours?
It's weird. I used to think it was sort of social anxiety, but it wasn't when it started. I think it developed into social anxiety, especially through the course of the pandemic as well, lockdown and things like that. I definitely think it got worse in that sense. And now, if I'm anxious about something, it usually is, to do with something social, other people, situations, things like that. So probably I would say now social anxiety, but it's not always been.
Social anxiety is a hard one because actually one of the reasons I love this podcast is we have so many different types of anxiety. There's so many different types of anxiety in the world. And I think when people say they have anxiety, people often think social anxiety. That's the thing they think of, like, and they also have a lot of misconceptions of like social anxiety means you could never talk to people, but it actually means a lot more than that. Because I believe that you're quite good at talking to people when you're in the situation from what I've seen, but
yeah,
it doesn't mean that you're okay inside.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people think when they find out I have anxiety. And it's social anxiety. It's like, but you're so sociable. You're like one of the most sociable people I know. And that is true, like we were saying. But yeah, like you say, you never know really what's going on inside. And inside, there is just like this so much anxiety. Yeah. Not all the time, but like a lot of the time. But yeah, that's the thing about it, isn't it? You never really know.
Yep. And the coolest thing ever in the world is you doing exposure therapy, because anyone listening doesn't know what exposure therapy is. It's kind of just, when you have an anxiety or fear around a certain thing, trying to expose yourself slowly to that fear. The thing that I find like the coolest thing about you is how much you do things by yourself. And I know so many people that would love to do things by themselves, but they have so many different fears around it. Was that something in the beginning that you found really hard?
Yeah, 100%. It was probably this time last year almost. And yeah, my anxiety was probably at its peak, I think, maybe from, and it was so bad. I was, in my last relationship, so codependent to the point where I couldn't do anything by myself, like even go to a doctor's appointment and things like that. And obviously when the relationship ended, there was an element of like, oh God, like what now, And so I think that really was a kind of, it's hard. You say wake up call, but, you're anxious, that's kind of it. But it was like right. And I've always been someone who's been really independent as well. So I think I really hated that as well, because it was like, this isn't me, like I know I can do this. So yeah, I think, and it's weird, like, I've had struggled with anxiety probably for about 8 years now. But like I say, then was probably the worst time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually went to CBT around that time as well. And that was kind of when the idea of exposure therapy was introduced to me, because I didn't really know much about it before then too. And that was when I was like, okay, I feel like this could be good for me. This could work. And it really has helped a massive amount.
That's so amazing. And I remember that time for you of like going through a breakup, and they're hard enough, but you can kind of like everyone has their coping strategies with anxiety. Like mine's, I love my bike. It really helps me. I have like, or medication or whatever it is. And so when that's taken away from you, it's like a rug is ripped out from under your feet. I imagine it could go two ways of being like, oh my God, like what the hell am I going to do? And then it must have been really cool. Like when you had, I imagine, had a lot of those thoughts and then being like, wait, maybe I can actually do those things because you had your safe person there, you would just use them all the time because they were there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think there was definitely that period of like, oh God, like what the hell am I going to do? Like, and it was just like, I don't know. I just didn't know. But yeah, that CPT, I genuinely think it kind of saved my life in a way. And it was, I only did it for a few weeks. It was actually a focus group that I found through a Facebook group, and they were university students, and they were just looking for people for the study. And again, it was about anxiety, and I was like, well, why not? And then like the idea of exposure therapy was brought up, and I remember we were talking about it, and it's like, what's one thing that you want to do that you can't fathom doing? And for me, it was obviously living in Porty. It was like, I really just want to go to the beach by myself, but like by myself, like no distractions, no like, because I would always have to have like my phone or a coffee or a book or something to kind of be like, I'm not alone though, because I have these things, and I think that's kind of where, for me, the social aspect comes into it, of the whole idea of like, people see you alone and they'll be like, look at that girl on her own, which is ridiculous, but that's kind of what it was. And it seemed like such a simple thing, but I couldn't imagine doing it then. Like it was the hardest thing ever. So then I remember they just broke it down really, really well and were like, do it step by step and see how you get on. And I did. And yeah, now I do that all the time. And it's like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's so weird. That is probably the one thing, the main thing that helps my anxiety now, is going to the beach alone with myself, with my thoughts, nothing. And it's so weird that was once something that I was like, I can't do that because I'm so anxious.
It's like magical as well that that's only been 1 year. Like people do exposure therapy for years and years and years. I'm not saying that one's better than the other. If you're somebody that's going through exposure therapy and it's taken 10 years, I'm one of those people. Doesn't mean anything's better or worse or whatever. But like, it's so cool that in the space of 1 year, how far you've come. If you don't mind me asking, when you were saying like you had like anxiety about going to the beach, what were the kind of thoughts that you were having? Like, what was your anxiety?
I think it was a mixture of things. Like there was definitely that element of like, you will be by yourself. Like I've always kind of had that. And it's weird. I don't know why that is an anxiety I have, because like I say, I love doing things by myself. But at that time, I think because it was particularly hard, it was like, you are alone. And then it felt like a bad thing. So I think that anxiety started to sort of creep in. And I've suffered from panic attacks quite a lot in the past. So I think there was that as well, of kind of like, what if you go and you have a panic attack and you're alone and nobody can help you, and that kind of thing too. Yeah. So yeah, it was just, it was odd. I think the main thing was the whole, you're alone. And yeah, this weird kind of like, people be watching you and, think whatever, almost see that you're alone. And that, again, that seemed like a bad thing at the time, which now, again, I'm just like at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Yeah. So yeah, it's really, really good.
I know people that have like this similar anxiety that are like, when they're feeling really anxious, it feels like every single person on the street staring at them. And it's like, obviously, like logically, nobody's actually looking at you, but it feels like, oh, everyone's looking at me and they're all thinking horrible things. And I'm still a little bit like that with like going to a cafe by myself. I'm like, everyone's going to think I have no friends. One, who cares? Yep. It's not a big deal if people think that. And two, that's not true. But it's so crazy. Our minds just can really go away with us.
Yeah, I always think this as well. Like I always say this, like, and I think this is your anxiety as well. It almost lies to you and convinces you things that aren't true. Like I was kind of like that there's been a couple of instances, like going to the cinema, for example. I used to always see people at the cinema alone and think, wow, how cool. Like I would love to come to the cinema alone because you can just go and see what you want. And like, you can sit where you want and all that. But I was like, I could never do that. Yeah. Because everybody would be sitting thinking, look at her by herself. And now I obviously do that. But what kind of changed my perspective on that was I was on a yoga retreat last year with this amazing girl called Jess. I always go to the back of the yoga class. And one of the classes was quite busy. And I was like, oh God, I need to get a spot at the back. And she was like, well, why do you always sit at the back? And I was like, oh, because I can't sit at the front because then everyone will look at me and see how bad I am at yoga. And she was like, is that what you do when you see people at the front? And I was like, oh God, no. Like, I'm always like, you look great. I'm not even paying attention to them because I'm doing my own thing. And then she was like, then why would people do that to you? And it was kind of like a light bulb moment of like, they wouldn't.
No.
And it really is like your mind convinces you, this anxious feeling of like, everybody cares about me, everybody's looking at me, everyone's judging me. But then when you kind of get out of that, out of your head, and you're like, no, they're not, because I'm not. And if they are, then it's about them, not me. And yeah, I think that was a real turning point for me of kind of like, and then that's the same thing. It happened with like going to the cinema and like eating out alone and things, and it's sort of everything.
You're right. Like, so it's so about them and not about you. Like if the worst case happened, which wouldn't actually be a bad thing, you'd survive and it would be okay. If somebody, also you wouldn't know. Like, you're never going to know. So you might as well think to yourself, everyone thinks I'm great. Because, like, you're never going to know either way. And the really cool thing is, Leila now goes on holiday by herself. She goes to, like, loads of different destinations by herself. She goes to gigs by herself. Seen Lewis Capaldi by herself. Like, it's in a year, you went from, I'm nervous to go, like, 2 or 3 minutes from my home to go to the beach. And now you're like, okay, cool. I'm catching a flight by myself.
And definitely, I know, I think it has become a bit of a like I'm definitely quite a high achiever in life in general. So I think it has become a kind of like, I just want to be able to do everything by myself. Because I think being in that relationship and being so codependent, I just completely lost who I was. Yeah. And it just makes me really sad. So yeah, now, like you say, it's just like, and there are times, obviously doing stuff with your loved ones, with friends is incredible.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's not going to be possible. And, there have been instances where, like, I'm going to Marrakesh next week and it was like nobody really wanted to come or nobody was able to come. And I've always wanted to go there. And I was like, I want to go, but by myself. And I was just like, you know what? Fuck it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Why not? I'm really excited, to go by myself. And it doesn't really even phase me now. It just kind of feels really natural. And yeah, it's like you say, like the gigs as well. Like, it's just like, and I'm so happy I'm at that place now because it's like I can go by myself and have just as good a time, sometimes a better time in my own company, which is, I think, really important.
I think it's good doing things by yourself as well, because you don't have to worry if the other person's having a good time or if they, want to leave or whatever. You can just be like, I want to leave now or I want to stay now. And you don't have to answer to anyone. You could walk out halfway through the cinema and it doesn't matter. You don't need to tell anybody. Like, you're just free to do whatever you want to do. And when you went through your breakup, it was like quite a long-term relationship you're in. And like you said, codependent. There was a lot of codependency. And I think that's quite common. Like, I think especially maybe for people that have anxiety, to feel like, when you get into a relationship with somebody, they understand or they show like signs of understanding you. And that's the first time you've ever experienced feeling properly understood. Like, it can be so hard to not be around that. Like, and I think anxious girls are probably more prone to codependent relationships. So what do you have any advice for somebody that is currently in a codependent relationship? What would you say to them? I know that's a hard question.
No, I think it's so hard because obviously, you're in a relationship with someone, you love them, they love you, you want to look after them, they want to look after you, you want to keep each other safe. Like, that's not a bad thing. But I think it definitely crosses a line at some point of like, to the point of being unhealthy.
Yeah.
So I think it's just about firstly recognizing that. Like, I can look back now and be like, that was not good. Yeah. But at the time, I was thinking just complete denial about it because, it's hard when you're in a situation. Yeah. It's so much easier. And other people from the outside might tell you, but it's very difficult for you in a situation, especially if you're anxious and that's your safe space to like break out of that. But then I feel like you do know that I definitely knew deep down. Yes. But again, there's a lot of denial.
Yes.
But I think it's so hard. I think it's just about being brave.
Yeah.
And just kind of, and it doesn't necessarily mean like, it doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Depend on someone. Of course not. But at the end of the day, especially in a relationship, it could end. And when that ended, I was like terrified because I was like, this is my whole life. Like, what now? And again, that's not healthy.
No.
So I think it's definitely about just recognizing that, sort of believing in yourself as well. Like, I kind of wish I could go back and tell myself that like I always talk about this in therapy. Like, I wish I had, like, if there's something I'm anxious about, I just need like a little 30-second like preview, like a trailer for a film or something of me in the future, totally fine. And if I could just have that little clip, I would be fine now.
Yeah.
But it's obviously you can't have that in life. It's not how it works. But I think it's kind of like that. Like, I wish I could kind of go back and show myself then, me now, and be like, you're going to be okay. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, it's going to be hard. There's going to be stuff along the way that you're going to be like, what the hell? But yeah, I think you've just got to kind of believe in yourself. And that whole thing, like your anxiety is lying to you a lot of the time, and is going to try and convince you can't do things, or you're not strong enough. And it's going to take you away from potentially some really good experiences, relationships, all these things. And you just got to, it's obviously easier said than done, but like, try and find a way to not let it.
And like you said, a lot of the time we have a gut feeling, and in a relationship that's not, I wasn't in a codependent relationship before, but it wasn't a good relationship at all. I knew deep down, like, oh, this isn't good. I don't think I even love this person anymore. Like, but you're so scared of being on your own. That's the worst thing that could ever, you can't think of anything worse than being on your own. And also convincing yourself, like, no one else will ever love me. This is the only person in the whole world that will ever love me. And just to say that is not true, like, absolutely not true. Like, and dating with anxiety is really hard too. Like,
oh yeah,
meeting new people constantly, and all the socialness around it is like quite yucky, even for people that don't suffer with anxiety. But it's also fun.
Oh yeah, totally. Like, it's great. And again, I think it's just like, you have to kind of get out of your head a bit, I think, and just be like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Totally.
But yeah, definitely. It's really, really hard. Like, and I think it is just finding, like I say, like, that's probably been about 8 years now I've struggled with anxiety. Last year, I found exposure therapy. It was kind of what has helped me the most. And I think as well, like just kind of, again, about the codependency thing. And now I try and do this with not just relationship stuff, but everything. Kind of like, if it was a friend and they were in this situation and they were telling me, I would, and that kind of tells you how you feel. And it is kind of like, if you tell your friend that, why are you not holding yourself to that same kind of, because you deserve just as much as they do. 100%. So
be on your own side about things. Like, you believe yourself as well. Because sometimes you can be like, I think this is codependency. I don't think I want to be in this relationship. But I can't really trust myself because it could be my anxiety. And we've kind of, actually, one of the questions I had for you is, what would you tell your younger self? And that's so nice that you've brought that up. I've been like, I wish we could, it's uncertainty. Anxiety is all about uncertainty. You don't know. And that's horrible for us to try and be like, to just try and guess. Because when we try and guess, we think of the worst things that could possibly happen. Sometimes I say to myself, okay, what's the medium case scenario? Because I've definitely already thought about all the worst case scenarios that could happen. So what's the medium and most likely case scenario? It's probably everything's going to be fine. It's maybe a bit boring and mundane.
Yeah, that's actually really good. Yeah. I think I kind of try to do that as well. Like, like I say, I've struggled with panic attacks, and they used to be awful. Mm-hmm. But again, I think it's like, it's so hard. It's unbelievably hard. But again, it's kind of about mindset and like, okay, I'm going to have a panic attack. Like, I'm sure you spoke about it on Anxiety Chats recently, and you kind of felt like you were going to have a panic attack. And then you were kind of just like, if I have a panic attack, then I have a panic attack. Like, and I think that, there's a real thing. I was like this when I first started struggling with anxiety, of kind of like, need to fix this. Yeah. Whereas that's maybe not always possible. Like, we might always have anxiety. Yeah. But it's about managing it and kind of, finding out what works for you, not necessarily what the doctor says or what works for someone else, things like that. Like, it's different for everyone. And everyone's got different experiences and different kind of levels of anxiety and how it affects them. So yeah, I think it really is just about you. Because like you say, you there has to be an element of, you like that gut feeling thing. Like there's a quote I really like that's gut feelings are guardian angels. And I really like that because it's so true. Like, you know yourself best.
And I think women's gut feelings are very strong. Our intuition is very strong.
100%.
I remember opening a book. This was like a while ago, maybe like when I was a teenager, and it was like a self-help book. And I opened it, and the first page said, "You probably won't ever recover from anxiety." I remember closing that book straight away and being like, fuck, that's not what I want to read right now. when I was like in an actual hell, like torment day after day, constant panic attacks. But now I understand, doesn't mean your anxiety is going to be at that same level all the time. Like, doesn't mean
No.
your anxiety is going to be terrible all the time. It means make anxiety your friend and make it something that you talk to, and make it something that's like, okay, yep, I feel those panic attack emotions, but I'm going to keep walking because I think it's going to be okay. And not like fighting. I think that's the thing, is when you fight your anxiety, you're like, no, 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 don't come. It's going to come really thick and fast, and it's going to be really
Yep.
grim. Obviously, again, like we've said, all much easier to say than when you're in that moment and it feels really hard.
Yeah, definitely. I've had that as well. Like, I've spoke about that in therapy a lot, because I think I definitely have a bad habit of kind of just trying to ignore things. Like, it's like, oh, I can feel that, like you say, feel that anxiety, but I'm just going to try and pretend it's not there. It's going to be there.
Yeah.
And like you say, the more you ignore it, the worse it may get.
Yeah.
You kind of have to do that. Like you say, just look at it in the face and be like, I'm not scared of you.
Yeah.
Like, and like you say, it doesn't have to be this big bad thing
Nope.
that you need to get rid of, or this horrible part of you.
Yeah.
It can just be something that you have and you live with,
Yeah.
and you learn to kind of deal with. And that's something else that's kind of helped me slightly a little bit, is kind of like, not that anxiety is a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes it can be, again, about that whole gut feeling thing. It can be kind of, if you kind of look inward, tell you things about situations or people or yourself that, it's giving you sort of sign, like, why am I really anxious about this situation? Like, and if you, sometimes you might, because sometimes it might be ridiculous, like, why am I anxious about going to the beach? The beach is lovely. I love the beach. But, why am I anxious about going out with this group of friends?
Yeah.
And then you kind of start to think, well, is it them? Is it the environment? Am I not comfortable? And yeah, again, it's just about kind of learning about yourself and what makes you comfortable.
That's the other thing, is I find friendships, like, I love my friends so much. They're like such an important part of my life, and like, I just love them. But, I think I find friendship like stuff more tricky than relationship stuff sometimes, because I'm like, I don't know, like, I find it difficult, and I find it difficult when people don't understand, and I find it difficult when I disagree with somebody about something, because I take that as a personal attack. Like, I remember at school being like, if you're in a friendship group in school and it's not great, you think that's you forever. But you are a really good example of, like, you make friends so many places. You have different friend groups, you have different friends in different places. Like, you can make friends. I know it's really hard, but like, you're a person with social anxiety and you can make friends. Like, it's really, really cool. Like, for anyone listening that has social anxiety, and I get a lot of questions actually from people saying, how do you make friends as an adult? Like, especially somebody with anxiety that might have different needs or different, all those kinds of things. Like, but you're somebody that suffers with anxiety and you have lots of friends that you've made in your adult life as well.
Yeah. Again, in the last year, that was the other thing after the breakup. It was because I'd been so codependent. It was like, I still had close friends, but not necessarily nearby, And I remember, like, I reached out to you afterwards, and, I didn't know you that well then, but again, I think it was just that kind of like, you kind of have to, otherwise, like, you don't have to, obviously, you can just not, but, you want to, and it's scary. It's really scary. But again, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And I think, you just got to be brave and push yourself, put yourself out there and be open to it. And I mean, some of the friends I've made in the last year are just incredible. Like, I'll have them for life.
Yeah.
And again, it's another thing that I wish I could just show that, like, this time last year, and be like, it is possible, because it is hard, especially I think as well with COVID, and I work from home as well, so I'm not sort of working out in an office, socializing. So it is really difficult to meet people, and it's daunting, because it's kind of like we were saying about dating as well. It's the same sort of thing, because meeting new people is really,
it's tough.
Like, and it can be awkward, and it's just not easy at all. And
for anyone listening, like, Leila messaged me, and we had, like she said, we didn't really know each other that well, but we knew of each other. And those people that you're just like, oh, I feel like we'd get on so well, but how do you bring up, like, do you want to be my friend? And like, if you're in that position, like, Leila sent me such a nice message that said, like, oh, I'd love to hang out in Port A, or whatever it was that your message was. And it was like, the person on the receiving end of that text is always going to be delighted. Like somebody messaging you and like inviting you to do something nice, and somebody that you like, you know what I mean? It's never going to be met with all the things you think of somebody being like, oh, why is she texting me, or whatever you think somebody's going to think. It's never that
Oh yeah.
way. It's always like, oh my God, that's so lovely, you know?
No. Yeah. And I think that's the same sort of thing. It's like, how would you feel if someone else did that to you? And someone did that to me last year as well. It was like, messaged me on Instagram and just said, like, I think we would vibe, we should go out sometime. And we went out and we had a great time. And it's just like, you know, it's so nice. Like, but again, getting to that point can be really difficult.
For sure. And my last question for you, Leila, is do you have a story of a time you experienced anxiety that you would like to share?
Yes, there was one. So it was last year. It was in the summer, and I had just gone back to my old workplace, and there was a work night out, and it was the first work night out back. First one in a while. And like I say, working remotely is quite challenging. It's quite hard to build relationships. But I'd been with the company for 2 years almost at that point, on and off. So yeah, there was this work night out, and I'd got ready. I'd got all dressed up. I'd had a drink. I was like ready to go. And then it got to the time of the bus, and I was like, I'll wait for the next one. And that went on for about 5 different buses because I was so anxious about this. And it was like I was glued to my sofa. I just could not go. I could not go. And I remember I phoned one of my best friends, and she was like, why don't you just not go? And I was like, oh, I'm pissed off though, because I want to go. You know, it's a nice opportunity. I've got nothing else to do. I've got all dressed up. Like, it's annoying that I can't go, that this anxiety is, you know, making me not want to go. And again, I think it was just like, and like I say, I was about an hour late probably after all missing every single bus. But again, I think that was a mixture of kind of like, well, why do you feel anxious here? Because you've just started back at the company. You've not been on many nights out before. You don't know that many people. It's okay to feel anxious about this. Like, don't beat yourself up about it. Then also that element of like, but you know that you can go.
Yeah.
And you know that you'll probably go and have a great time. And again, if you don't, you can leave.
Yeah.
Or you know, it wasn't good. Oh well, maybe next time I won't go. So again, that kind of like, you can do it, like just that believing in yourself and just like being like, I'm not gonna let the anxiety scare me, you know, or stop me. Again, maybe if you were like, I genuinely do feel like I'm too anxious to go, then that's totally fine. Because sometimes, you know, you just can't do it. And that's not a bad thing at all. That's actually a really strong thing. But yeah, I was like, you're going on this night out. So I got a taxi in the end. And yeah, it was a great, great night out. And I feel like it kind of going did help with some of the anxieties because, you know, I sort of made friends with there, like spoke to some people I hadn't seen in a while. And it was just really, really nice. And yeah, I think the more, for me anyway, the more times that happens, more times that I experience that, it's made it so much easier.
Yeah.
Because it's like that doubt is still there, you know, it's very much like it's not there, it's not gone away in any way. But if it is there, I like acknowledge it, but also just go like, no, you know, like I'm not gonna let you do this. And I know that we can do it. And if we can't, then that's also fine.
Yes. That's the thing. It's not about the outcome of how it goes. Like, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's about, and also, I'm just sorry that Leila went through that, because I can totally imagine like being like the next one. And, you know, and there is always a next one. There's always a next one. But I think the important thing is that you do it. Like, and even if it's literally like, right, okay, I'm going to get on for one stop and then get off and then come home. And then I've tried, you know, I've really tried. And I sometimes have checkpoints in my head if I'm doing something or going somewhere that's quite far and I find it quite difficult. But like, well, I'll just try and get to this spot, and then I'll try and get to the next spot. And you can check in with yourself each time, like, how am I feeling now? And sometimes that's not great. Sometimes you just need to distract yourself. But like, I think that's the biggest thing with anxiety. The more we avoid these situations, the worse it's going to be. Because I imagine if you'd avoid at that time, the next Christmas party would be even worse because you'd have 2 lots of it. And again, listeners know I have agoraphobia. This isn't, it's not, I don't follow this advice. Do what I say, not what I do. That's a quote. But, I'm trying to do that more, and it looks different for everybody. And your anxiety might be literally walking out your front door. That is okay. That is absolutely okay. It really is. And the more times you walk out your front door, it's the same sentiment. The more times you walk out your front door, the easier it might get. I love that story so much. It has such a nice ending.
No, it was. Yeah, it was great. And I'm so glad I went. And it was just kind of like a bit of a, no, like,
come on,
we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And I think I was the same. I think I was like, even if you just go for one drink.
Yeah.
And you see people, you say hello, that's it. And if you feel like, you can leave.
Yeah.
You can get another taxi home. It's really that simple. But again, you go, once you're there, if you feel better, then
it's also anticipatory.
You get to have a great time.
Like anticipatory anxiety is probably the worst one, because you're just thinking all the things that could go wrong. But actually, how many times have you been in a situation where you've been so anxious about it, you've got there within literally 2 minutes? It's fine. Like, happens so often.
I know. It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, it's annoying.
But always like the worst. That's what it does. It makes you think of the worst thing, and it's like, well, what about the best case?
Yeah,
but we never think about that.
I know, that's a really good question. Yeah. Let's try and go away from this podcast, and every time we think of the worst case, we say to ourselves, what's the best case and the medium case?
Oh yeah, I really like the medium case. I've never really thought of that, but that's really good. I will definitely try that.
Thank you so much, Leila, for coming on. You are such an absolute delight. We'll
thanks.
Leave Leila's socials in the description of wherever you're listening to this, because Leila's just like super, super lovely. You'll all love her and her content. And we will see you on another episode of Anxiety Chat soon. If you would like to come on the podcast like Leila has, it's not as scary as you think, I promise you. Or you can send us your anonymous story through the link in our description as well. And we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.